We are removing this woman from the company immediately. Security is going to escort her to the exit." Those words left the mouth of my son, Julian, without him even lifting his eyes from the computer screen. His voice sounded cold, mechanical, as if he were reading a generic corporate press release. I was standing in front of his desk, the same solid oak desk that my late husband and I had bought 35 years ago, when this company was nothing more than a dream and 3 sewing machines in a rented warehouse in the garment district. Now, that desk sat in a glass-walled office on the 12th floor, with a panoramic view of the city skyline, and my son occupied it as if it had always belonged to him. This woman, that is what he called me. Not Mom, not Eleanor. This woman, as if I were a stranger who had trespassed into a place where she no longer had any business being. I felt the eyes of every employee fixed on me from the other side of the glass. The operations floor was packed. More than 40 people had stopped working to witness the scene. Some had their eyes wide open, others looked at the floor in discomfort, but everyone was there, silent witnesses to my public humiliation. Veronica, Julian's wife, was leaning against the filing cabinet with her arms crossed and a barely concealed smirk on her lips. She wore an impeccable gray power suit and heels that clicked loudly every time she shifted, as if she wanted to ensure everyone knew she was there. She looked me up and down with that calculated disdain that only a woman like her could perfect. I was wearing a simple beige dress, the same type of attire I always wore to work. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed for attention. In 40 years of building this textile empire, I never needed to shout to be heard. Julian kept typing on his computer. He did not even have the decency to look me in the eye while he kicked me out like a problematic employee. This was his first day as chief executive officer. His first damn day. And the first thing he decided to do was humiliate the woman who gave him life, who built every inch of this building with her own hands, who sacrificed years of her youth so that he could have a future. 2 security guards appeared at the door. One of them was Marcus, a man who had worked with us for 12 years. I had watched him grow professionally. I had gone to his daughter's graduation. I had given him a bonus when his wife was sick. Now he looked at me with eyes full of confusion and shame, not knowing what to do. "Your badge, please." Veronica's voice cut through the silence like a knife. She extended her hand with that irritating confidence of someone who believes they have already won. "We need to recover all corporate access items." Policy of the new administration. New administration. As if 40 years of history could be erased in a single morning. As if every tough decision I made, every sleepless night reviewing finances, every vendor I convinced to give us credit when no one believed in us, as if all of that could disappear because my son decided I was no longer useful. I took the security badge off my neck slowly. I held it in my hand for a moment, feeling the weight of the worn plastic. That badge had my photo from 15 years ago, when my hair was still completely black and the wrinkles around my eyes were barely starting to show. The company was billing $3 million annually back then. Now we were billing $87 million. I took the badge and placed it gently on the desk, right in front of Julian. He still did not look at me. Coward, that is what he was. A coward who needed his wife to do the dirty work while he pretended to be busy with important matters. "I want to do this right," I said in a calm voice. So calm that even Veronica frowned for a second. "Tell your wife that the board meeting in 3 hours should be interesting." Julian finally looked up. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of confusion and annoyance, as if my words had been a pestering fly interrupting his moment of glory. "There is no board meeting today, Mom." His voice sounded condescending, as if he were speaking to a confused elderly woman. "Don't worry about those things anymore. Rest, enjoy your retirement. Retirement." The word hung in the air like poison. I was 69 years old, that is true, but my mind was sharper than ever. I knew every number, every contract, every legal detail of this company better than anyone in this building. And he was talking to me about retirement as if I were an exhausted worker, ready to collect her pension and disappear. "Sure," I replied with a small smile. "Excuse the confusion." I turned around and walked toward the door. Marcus stepped aside automatically. I did not need an escort. I knew the way out better than anyone. After all, I had designed the layout of this building. As I walked down the hallway, I heard the murmurs. Some employees were still staring, others pretended to work, but their fingers were not moving over the keyboards. I recognized every face. Linda from accounting, David from logistics, Sarah from human resources. All of them knew me. They knew who had signed their paychecks for years, who had approved their vacations, who had cried with them at funerals and celebrated at weddings. But now they watched me leave like an expelled intruder. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened almost immediately. I entered and turned around to look one last time toward Julian's office. He had already returned to his computer. Veronica was watching me from behind the glass with that victorious smile plastered on her face. Poor woman. She had no idea what was coming. The elevator doors closed, and I began to descend. I took my phone out of my purse and dialed a number I knew by heart. Arthur, it is me. I need you to come to my house in 1 hour. Bring the documents we keep in the safe at the firm. Yes, those. The original deeds and the articles of incorporation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Did something happen? Arthur asked with a worried voice. He had been our attorney for 30 years. He knew every legal secret of the company. My son just made the biggest mistake of his life. I replied as the elevator doors opened on the ground floor. And in 3 hours, he's going to understand it. I drove to my house in absolute silence. I did not even turn on the radio. I just needed the sound of my own thoughts, organizing themselves like dominoes ready to fall one after another. 40 years. 40 damn years building something from scratch, and my own son treats me like trash on his first day of power. The irony was almost poetic. Almost. I arrived at my house, a modest residence in a quiet suburban neighborhood that I bought 20 years ago when the company finally began generating real profits. Nothing flashy. A 2-story colonial with a garden and a small fountain in the front. Julian always complained that I did not live like a successful chief executive officer should live. He said it looked like the house of a retired school teacher, not a woman who ran a company worth $87 million annually. But that was exactly the difference between him and me. I did not need to prove anything to anyone. I entered the house and went straight to my study. The walls were covered with photographs. My husband and I, the day we signed the first big contract with a department store chain. The grand opening of our first real factory. Julian as a child, smiling in his little school uniform. Julian at his university graduation. Julian the day I told him that one day all of this company would be his. How stupid I was. I sat at my desk and opened the bottom drawer. There was the thick manila folder I had not touched in years. I took it out and placed it in front of me. Inside were all the original documents of the company. Articles of incorporation, property records, stock distribution, operating agreements. Everything signed, sealed, and notarized 35 years ago. When my husband died 8 years ago, many assumed that the company would automatically pass to Julian. But my husband had been very clear in his will. Everything remained in my name. Every share, every asset, every decision. He trusted me because he knew I was the one who really understood the business. He was good with people, charismatic, a born salesman, but I was the one who handled the numbers, the one who negotiated with the banks, the one who made the tough decisions that no one else wanted to make. 80% of the shares were registered in my name. Julian had 5% that I gifted him when he turned 30, a symbolic gesture so he would feel like part of something. The other 15% was distributed among 3 board members, loyal people who had been with us since the beginning. Robert was one of them. He had been my husband's best friend and one of the first investors when no one else believed in our idea. Last week, when I told Julian that I would name him Chief Executive Officer, I saw something in his eyes that I should have recognized as a warning. It was not gratitude, it was ambition. Or, worse yet, it was Veronica's ambition reflected in him like a mirror. Veronica. That woman entered our lives 3 years ago like a calculated tornado. She met Julian at a corporate event, and in 6 months they were already married. I tried to warn him. I told him it was too fast, that he barely knew her, that something about her did not sit right with me. But he was blinded. She was beautiful, intelligent, ambitious. She said all the right things at the right time. And little by little she began to poison my son against me. Subtle comments first. Your mom is from another generation. She doesn't understand modern business. You should have more control over strategic decisions. She treats you like a child, not like the professional you are. And Julian, My son, who once hugged me and told me I was his hero, began to change. He became distant. He questioned every single one of my decisions. He would arrive at board meetings with proposals that clearly were not his ideas but Veronica's, who had never worked a single day in our industry but suddenly believed herself to be an expert in textiles. The doorbell rang. I looked at the clock. Arthur had arrived on time as always. I opened the door, and there he was, a man of 72 years with completely white hair and eyes that had seen too many legal battles. He carried a worn leather briefcase in one hand and an expression of genuine concern on his face. "Eleanor, what happened?" He entered the house without waiting for an invitation. In 30 years of friendship, formalities had disappeared long ago. "My son kicked me out of my own company this morning," I said while closing the door. In front of all the employees, he called me this woman and ordered security to escort me to the exit. Arthur stood motionless for a second. Then he let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "He cannot be that stupid." "Oh, but he is. And he has a wife who is even more stupid but much more dangerous." We sat in the living room. Arthur opened his briefcase and took out a folder even thicker than mine. These are certified copies of all the corporate documents. Deeds, minutes, shareholder registry, company bylaws. He turned the pages slowly until he reached the section he needed. Here it is. Article 12, Section 3 of the Corporate Bylaws. The Chief Executive Officer can be appointed or removed solely by a majority vote of the Board of Shareholders. And any executive action affecting a member of the board or a shareholder requires prior approval from the board itself. "Exactly," I said. "Julian did not have the authority to fire me. He did not even have the authority to take my badge without a formal vote." "He knows you hold 80%? Arthur asked. "Apparently not, or he never cared to find out. When I named him Chief Executive Officer last week, I gave him administrative authorization. He can make operational decisions, sign contracts, manage personnel. But I never, ever signed a transfer of stock control. I never resigned from my position on the board, and I definitely never gave him permission to disrespect me in that manner." Arthur smiled. A small smile, but sharp as a razor. "Then technically he just committed gross insubordination against the chairwoman of the board and the majority shareholder of the company. Technically," I repeated. "Illegally. And morally. What do you want to do?" "I want to take back what is mine. I want my son to learn that power is not inherited by last name, but is earned with respect and competence. And I want that woman to understand that messing with my family was the worst mistake of her life." Arthur closed the folder and looked me straight in the eyes. He had worked with me long enough to know when I was speaking seriously. "I am convening the board meeting for 4 o'clock this afternoon. I have the numbers for Robert and the other members. Everyone is going to want to be present when they hear what happened." "Perfect. And Arthur, one more thing. I need you to review all corporate communications from the last 3 months. Emails, messages, new contracts that Julian might have initiated. I want to know exactly what Veronica has been doing behind the scenes. Do you suspect something specific? A woman does not convince a son to kick out his mother without having a plan of her own. Veronica wants something, and I am going to find out what it is before this day ends." Arthur left my house with a clear mission. He had 3 hours to contact all the board members and ensure they were present at the meeting. He also needed to access the corporate server and review all of Julian and Veronica's recent activity. We had the administrator credentials because, although my son did not know it, I had never resigned my top-level access in the system. I remained alone in the living room looking at the photographs on the mantelpiece. There was one of Julian when he was 8 years old, sitting on my lap while I reviewed blueprints of our first expansion. He always wanted to be part of the business. Since he was a child, he came to the factory with me on weekends, ran between the sewing machines, asked how everything worked. He was fascinated by the numbers, the logistics, the idea of creating something from nothing. At what moment did I lose that child? At what moment did he become the man who looked at me this morning as if I were a nuisance? The answer was obvious. Veronica. But I could not blame only her. Julian was an adult. He made the decision to humiliate me publicly. He chose to listen to his wife's whispers over his mother's years of sacrifice. And now he was going to learn that decisions have consequences. My phone rang. It was a message from Linda, the director of human resources. She had been one of the first people I hired 22 years ago when the company began to really grow. We had gone through financial crises, labor lawsuits, supplier changes, everything together. She knew me better than most. The message said, "Eleanor, I don't know what is happening, but everyone here is very confused. Julian just sent a memo saying there were changes in the management structure and that you decided to retire voluntarily. Is this true? Retire voluntarily? How convenient." So that was the narrative they were going to sell. I was not expelled. I was not humiliated. I simply decided to leave because I was too old to keep working. A clean lie, easy to digest. I replied to her, "Linda, I am not resigning from anything. There will be a board meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock. After that, everything is going to be very clear. Please do not say anything yet." She responded immediately, "Understood. But I want you to know that no one here is happy with what happened this morning. Everyone respects you. What he did was a horrible lack of respect." I put the phone away and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Julian might have the title of CEO, but I had something much more powerful. Loyalty. The people in that company knew me. They knew who built everything from scratch, and they were not going to forget it just because my son decided to rewrite history in a corporate memo. I went to the kitchen and made myself a coffee. I needed to keep my mind clear. While the water boiled, I mentally reviewed every step of what was going to happen in the next few hours. Arthur would summon Robert, David, and Susan, the 3 board members in addition to Julian and me. With my 80% in their combined votes, I would have an absolute majority for any decision. Julian and his 5% could do nothing. But it was not just about the numbers. It was about justice. It was about teaching my son that respect is not optional, that family loyalty has value, and that power misused always ends up destroying the one who wields it. The coffee was ready. I poured myself a cup and went back to my study. I opened my laptop and logged into the company's security system. Another thing Julian did not know. I had full access to all the surveillance cameras in the building. I could see in real time what was happening on every floor, every office, every hallway. I searched for the recording from this morning. There it was. The exact moment I entered his office. You could clearly see how he did not even look at me when he ordered my expulsion. You could see Veronica's smirk. You could see Marcus's discomfort when he had to carry out the order. You could see my calm face, my dignity intact as I handed over the badge. I downloaded the video and saved it in 3 different places. One copy on my computer, another on a USB drive, and another in the cloud. Irrefutable evidence of what really happened, just in case Julian tried to deny everything later. My phone rang again. This time it was Arthur. "I already contacted everyone. Robert is furious. He says he cannot believe Julian did something like that. David and Susan also confirmed attendance. Everyone is going to be there at 4 o'clock sharp. Perfect. And the communications? Here is where it gets interesting. Eleanor." Arthur paused. "I found a chain of emails between Veronica and a certain Mr. Vance. Does that name ring a bell?" Vance. Of course it rang a bell. Harlan Vance was the owner of a competing textile company. We had been competing for the same contracts, the same clients for years. He was a man without scruples who had tried to buy our company at least 3 times in the last decade. I always told him no. The company was not for sale. Yes, I know him. What does Veronica have to do with Vance? She is negotiating the sale of 30% of the company's shares. Veronica wrote to him 2 weeks ago saying she would soon have full access to the corporate structure and that they could close the deal before the end of the month. Vance offered $12 million for the stock package. I felt my blood freeze in my veins. $12 million. Veronica was trying to sell part of my company to our biggest competitor. And the worst part was that those shares were not hers to sell. They were not Julian's. They were mine. "Does Julian know about this?" I asked. There is an email where she mentions to Julian a very lucrative investment opportunity that could make both of them financially independent. He replied saying he trusted her judgment and to do whatever was necessary. Arthur sounded genuinely disgusted. "Eleanor, your son didn't just disrespect you. He was planning to commit corporate fraud. So it is not just arrogance. It is greed." Veronica saw an opportunity to get rich quick and convinced Julian that getting rid of me was the first step. Exactly. And if she had managed to finalize that sale, they would have violated at least 6 different corporate laws. Vance would have had access to confidential information, commercial strategies, client contacts. They would have destroyed everything you built. They are not going to destroy anything, I said with a firm voice, because in 3 hours they are going to learn that trying to steal what is mine was the worst decision of their lives. I have all the emails printed and notarized. They are legal evidence admissible in any proceeding. If you want, I can initiate legal actions against both of them for attempted fraud. Not yet. First, I want to see their faces when they realize they lost. After that, we will decide what to do about the legal consequences. I hung up the phone and stared at my laptop screen. There was Julian on the security camera, sitting in his glass office, reviewing documents with Veronica by his side. They looked so sure, so convinced that they had won. He was probably imagining his future as an all-powerful CEO, making decisions without his old-fashioned mother interfering. She was probably calculating how many designer handbags she could buy with $12 million. Poor idiots. They had no idea that the empire they thought they had conquered was never theirs to take. They had no idea that every paper they signed, every decision they took, every move they made was being documented and would be used against them. I looked at the clock. 2 hours and 40 minutes until the meeting. Enough time to shower, change into something more formal, and mentally prepare myself for the moment my son discovered who really held the power in this family. I showered and took my time choosing what to wear. I was not going to arrive at that meeting dressed like a defeated grandmother. I took a cream-colored tailored suit out of the closet that I had bought 2 years ago for an international conference. Elegant, but not flashy. Serious, but not severe. I applied light makeup, just enough to look rested and professional. I pulled my silver hair back into a low, elegant bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman who had built an empire, not the lady who had been kicked out that morning. Satisfied with my appearance, I checked one more time all the documents I would take to the meeting. The original articles of incorporation, the stock distribution registry, the corporate bylaws, my husband's will where everything was left in my name, the security recordings from this morning, and the jewel in the crown. The emails between Veronica and Vance planning to sell what did not belong to them. I put everything in my leather briefcase, the same one I have used for 15 years. Worn, but reliable. Like me, it was 3:20 in the afternoon. 40 minutes before the meeting, I decided to arrive early. I wanted to be already seated when Julian entered. I wanted to see his face when he saw me there waiting for him as if nothing had happened. I drove back to the company building. The same building from which I had been expelled barely 6 hours earlier. I parked in my usual spot, the one that had my name painted on the wall for 20 years. No one had erased the letters yet. Eleanor Sterling, founder. I took my briefcase and walked toward the main entrance. The guard at the reception desk was new. He had been working for barely 3 months. When he saw me arrive, he hesitated for a second. "Mrs. Sterling, they told me that I am here for a board meeting," I said with a kind but firm voice. "It is scheduled for 4 o'clock sharp in the boardroom on the 12th floor." The boy looked at his computer, confused. "I don't have any record of." "Call Arthur Penhaligon, the corporate attorney. He will confirm it for you." The boy made the call. I heard Arthur's voice on the other end explaining the situation. The boy nodded several times, hung up, and looked at me with a mixture of respect and nervousness. "You may go up, Mrs. Sterling. Excuse the confusion. Don't worry. You are just doing your job." I got into the elevator feeling every second as if time were moving in slow motion. The doors closed, and I began to ascend toward the 12th floor. The same floor from which I had been escorted that morning like a criminal. But this time was different. This time I controlled the situation. The doors opened. The hallway was quieter than in the morning. Most employees were still at their desks working. Some looked up when I passed. Their expressions were of absolute surprise. "Eleanor is back," I heard someone whisper. I walked straight toward the boardroom. A massive room with a mahogany table that could accommodate 20 people, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and state-of-the-art screens on the walls. We had invested $200,000 in remodeling that room 3 years ago. Arthur was already there, organizing documents on the table. When he saw me enter, he smiled. "You arrived early. I wanted to be ready. Has anyone else arrived?" Robert is on his way. He called me 10 minutes ago. David and Susan will arrive right at 4. They are furious. Eleanor, everyone is furious with what Julian did. I sat in my usual spot, the head of the table, the place I had occupied for 40 years in every important meeting. I placed my briefcase in front of me and took out the folders organized by subject. Everything had to be perfect. There could be no mistakes. 5 minutes later, Robert arrived. He was a man of 74 years, tall, with a perfectly trimmed white beard and blue eyes that always seemed to be evaluating everything. He had been my husband's silent partner from the beginning, the one who put up the first $10,000 when no one else believed in us. Now that man held 5% of the shares and was one of my most loyal allies. Eleanor, he said, hugging me tightly. I cannot believe what that boy did. His father would be ashamed. I know. But today, we are going to fix this. Damn right we are going to fix it. Pardon my language, but that kid needs to learn some manners. David arrived 3 minutes later. He was younger than Robert, barely 62 years old, but he had worked with us since we opened the second factory. He held 3% of the shares and managed our entire international supply chain. He was a logistics genius and one of the most honest men I knew. This is outrageous, he said as soon as he entered. I've been receiving calls from employees all afternoon asking what the hell is going on. No one understands why the founder was kicked out of her own company. Soon everything is going to make sense, I assured him. Susan was the last to arrive. She was the only woman besides me on the board. She held 2% of the shares and managed all our finances. She was a certified public accountant, 58 years old, with an impeccable reputation in the industry. If Susan said the numbers balanced, they balanced. If she said something smelled bad, something smelled bad. I reviewed the finances this afternoon after Arthur called me, she said, sitting down. There are strange movements in the accounts from the last 15 days. Small transfers to accounts I don't recognize. Payments to external consultants we never approved. Someone is moving money without board authorization. I have a theory about that, said Arthur, handing her a copy of the emails between Veronica and Vance. Susan read in silence. Her expression went from confusion to disbelief and finally to pure anger. This woman was preparing the ground to sell the company for parts. These external consultants are probably Vance's lawyers doing due diligence without us knowing. Exactly, I confirmed. Veronica convinced Julian that getting rid of me was the first step to taking total control. They didn't count on the fact that I am still the legal owner of 80% of this company. Robert let out a dry laugh. That boy never bothered to read the corporate documents, did he? Apparently, he assumed that being named CEO meant he now commanded everything. He didn't understand the difference between administrative authority and stock ownership. Fatal error, said David. An error that is going to cost him very dearly. I looked at the clock. 3:58. In 2 minutes, Julian would enter this room expecting to preside over his first board meeting as CEO. In 2 minutes, he would discover that the power he thought he had was never real. The door opened. Julian entered first, dressed in an expensive black suit, hair gelled back, a smug smile on his face. Veronica came behind him, wearing a fitted wine-colored dress and those damn heels that clicked with every step. Julian's smile disappeared as soon as he saw me sitting at the head of the table. "Mom, what are you doing here?" His voice sounded annoyed, as if I were a child who hadn't understood the rules of the game. "I am in a board meeting, Julian. Where else would I be?" Veronica approached him and whispered something in his ear. Julian nodded and cleared his throat. "Mom, I appreciate you coming, but this is an executive-level meeting. You are no longer part of the company's operating structure. You decided to retire this morning, remember?" "I decided nothing," I said calmly. "You expelled me, in front of all the employees. You called me this woman, and ordered security to escort me to the exit. But apparently, you forgot to check a small detail before doing all that." "What detail?" Veronica asked with a defiant tone. Arthur stood up and placed a certified copy of the shareholder registry in front of Julian. "The detail that your mother owns 80% of this company. The detail that you only have 5%. And the detail that, according to Article 12, Section 3 of the corporate bylaws, which apparently you never bothered to read, only the majority shareholder has the authority to appoint or remove the CEO. The silence that followed was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Julian looked at the documents. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the documents again. His face went from confidence to confusion, and finally to barely concealed panic. But you named me CEO. You gave me the position. I gave you administrative authorization, Julian. I did not give you control over the company. And I definitely did not give you permission to disrespect me. Veronica stepped forward before Julian could respond. This is ridiculous. Julian is the legally appointed CEO. You can't just show up and take what is his. What is his? I repeated calmly. Tell me, Veronica, exactly what is his? The 5% of shares I gifted him years ago? The title of CEO that I granted him last week? Or are you referring to the $12 million you plan to obtain by selling 30% of my company to Harlan Vance? The color drained from Veronica's face as if someone had opened a valve and let out all the blood. Julian looked at her, not understanding. Mom, what are you talking about? Arthur placed a thick folder on the table. We are talking about this. A complete chain of emails between your wife and our biggest competitor. Emails where she promises to hand over the company's confidential information, access to our clients, and a stock package of 30% valued at $12 million. Emails dated from 3 weeks ago. Emails that include your explicit approval to proceed with the transaction. That isn't true, Veronica said with a trembling voice. That is a misinterpretation. I was exploring legitimate investment options to diversify the company's portfolio. Legitimate investment options? Susan stood up from her chair with a copy of the financial statements in her hand. Is that why there are unauthorized transfers totaling $350,000 to external consultants that no one on this board approved? Is that why there are payments to a law firm that turns out to be the same one that represents Vance? Julian took the folder and began to read. His hands shook slightly as he turned the pages. I watched him in silence, seeing how every word he read destroyed the reality he thought he knew. Veronica, his voice came out weak, almost broken. What is this? It is exactly what it looks like, Robert said with disgust. Your wife convinced you to kick out your mother so you two could sell pieces of the company without supervision. She used you as a puppet to execute a plan that would have made you rich and destroyed everything your family built for 40 years. No. Veronica shook her head vigorously. It's not like that. Julian, don't believe them. Your mother is inventing all this because she can't accept that she isn't in charge anymore. She's jealous that you're the CEO now. I recorded her. I said simply. Veronica froze. I have the full video from this morning. Every word you said, every gesture, the way you smirked when my son humiliated me, the way you looked at me as if I were trash. Everything is documented and saved in 4 different locations. Arthur took out his laptop and connected it to the large screen in the room. In seconds, the scene from this morning played in high definition. There was Julian without looking up from his computer. We are removing this woman from the company immediately. There was Veronica leaning against the filing cabinet with that victorious smile. There was me, handing over my badge with dignity while everyone watched. The video ended. No one said anything for a long, uncomfortable moment. Julian dropped the folder on the table. The pages scattered. He put his hands to his face and took a deep breath. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded shattered. My God, what have I done? You made the mistake of trusting the wrong person, I said. You made the mistake of thinking that power is about shouting and humiliating. And you made the mistake of forgetting that I am your mother, but I am also the owner of this company. David crossed his arms. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? Why can't this stay like this? You are right, I said, rising from my chair. That is why I called this emergency board meeting. According to the corporate bylaws, I have the right to put to a vote the immediate removal of the CEO for cause. Causes include insubordination to a board member, attempted corporate fraud, and violation of the company's core values. Veronica took a step forward. You can't do that. Julian didn't do anything illegal. Ah, no? Susan opened another folder. He signed authorizations to move funds without board approval. That violates Article 8 of our bylaws. He approved contracts with external consultants without appropriate due diligence. That violates our compliance policies, and he participated in negotiations to sell corporate assets without informing the board. That doesn't just violate internal statutes. It also violates federal corporate law. Every word was a nail in the coffin of Julian's career as CEO. I didn't know, said Julian with a desperate voice. Veronica told me they were strategic investments. She told me that you were blocking the company's growth by being too conservative. She told me that if we didn't take control now, the company would remain stagnant. And you believed her, I said, feeling a mix of disappointment and sadness. You believed a woman you have known for 3 years over the mother who raised you for 45. You believed someone without experience in this industry over the founder who turned 3 sewing machines into a company worth $87 million a year. Julian had no answer for that. He simply lowered his head. I propose the immediate removal of Julian Sterling as CEO, Robert said formally. And I propose the permanent banishment of Veronica Sterling from all corporate facilities and the prohibition of any contact with employees or company matters. I second the motion, said David. I do as well, added Susan. Arthur took notes. Very well. According to the shareholder registry, we have present the 80% of Eleanor, 5% of Robert, 3% of David, 2% of Susan, and 5% of Julian. For the motion to pass, we need approval of at least 60% of the votes. Everyone looked at Julian. Technically, he could vote. His 5% would not change the final result because I alone had enough to approve anything, but it was a matter of principle. How do you vote, Julian? Asked Arthur. My son looked at me. There were tears in his eyes. For the first time in months, I saw the boy he used to be, not the arrogant man he had become. I am sorry, Mom. I am so sorry. That does not answer the question, I said, keeping my voice firm although inside my heart was breaking. I vote in favor, he whispered. I remove myself. Veronica let out a stifled gasp. Julian? Are you crazy? You can't just quit like that. Yes, I can, he said without looking at her. And I should have done it from the moment you asked me to kick out my mother. I should have realized I was making the worst mistake of my life. The vote is unanimous then, said Arthur, writing in his notebook. Julian Sterling is removed as CEO effective immediately. Veronica Sterling is banned from entering the facilities and from having contact with corporate matters. This decision remains recorded in the official minutes of the board. Veronica looked at me with pure hatred in her eyes. This isn't going to end here. I'm going to sue. I'm going to take this to every media outlet I find. I'm going to destroy this company's reputation. You can try, I said calmly. But I have recordings, emails, financial statements, and testimonies from 5 board members confirming attempted fraud. You have 2 options. Sign a confidentiality agreement right now and walk out of here with some dignity, or face criminal charges for conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. You decide. Veronica opened her mouth to respond, but Arthur already had a document prepared. He slid it across the table toward her. This is a confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement. You sign this, you commit not to speak publicly about any internal company matters, and in exchange, we do not file criminal charges against you. You have 30 seconds to decide. This is extortion, Veronica hissed. No, this is mercy, said Robert. If I were in Eleanor's place, you would already be talking to the police. But she's being more generous than you deserve. Veronica looked at Julian, seeking support. He remained seated with his head bowed, without looking at her. Finally, she took the pen Arthur offered her and signed the document with violent, quick strokes. She threw the pen on the table. I hope you're proud of yourself. You destroyed your own son's future out of ego. I didn't destroy anything, I replied. You 2 tried to steal what did not belong to you, and now you face the consequences. The difference is that I built this empire with honest work. You tried to take it with lies and betrayal. Veronica took her purse and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned to Julian one last time. Are you coming, or are you staying here begging for forgiveness like a child? Julian finally looked up. I think it is better if you leave alone, Veronica. I need to talk to my mother. Veronica's expression went from rage to disbelief. After everything I did for you, after all the plans we made together, is this how you repay me? You didn't do anything for me, said Julian with a tired voice. You used my position for your benefit. You turned me into someone I don't recognize. And you almost destroyed my relationship with my mother in the process. So yes, I think it is better if you leave." Veronica let out a bitter laugh. "You're a coward, just like your father probably was. A family of sentimental losers." Arthur rose from his chair with a serious expression. "Ma'am, I suggest you leave right now before you add defamation to the list of legal problems you already have." Veronica left, slamming the door. The sound echoed in the boardroom like thunder. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Robert broke the silence. "Well, that was uncomfortable but necessary. Now we need to decide who is going to occupy the position of CEO while we resolve this situation." Everyone looked at me. I already knew what they had to say before they opened their mouths. "Eleanor, you are the only logical option," said Susan. "You know every aspect of the business. You have the experience. You have the respect of the employees. Legally, as majority shareholder, you have every right." I shook my head. "No, I am not coming back as permanent CEO. I already did that job for 40 years. But I will assume the role temporarily until we find someone suitable." "How long?" asked David. 6 months. Enough time to stabilize operations, repair any damage that has been done, and look for an external candidate with real experience in the industry. Someone who is not family. Someone who understands that this business is built with respect and hard work, not with shortcuts and betrayals." Robert nodded. "Seems reasonable to me. All in favor?" Hands went up. Even Julian raised his, although his gesture was weak and defeated. "Approved unanimously," said Arthur. "Eleanor Sterling assumes role as interim CEO for a period of 6 months, starting today. This will be documented and communicated to all employees tomorrow, first thing in the morning." "And what do we do with Julian?" asked Susan, looking at him. Not with cruelty, but with genuine concern. "That is a good question." I looked at my son. He finally held my gaze. His eyes were red. His posture was completely different from the arrogant man who had kicked me out that morning. "Julian, what do you want to do?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Clearly I am not ready to lead a company. I thought I was, but I was only fooling myself. Or worse, I let Veronica fool me. I am going to make you a proposal." I said, "You keep your 5% of shares. I am not going to take that away from you because legally it is yours, and because despite everything, you are still my son. But you are going to start from the bottom again. You are going to work in every department of this company for the next 6 months. Production, logistics, sales, finance, human resources. You are going to learn how this business really works, not from a glass office, but from the factory floor." "And after the 6 months?" he asked. "Afterward, we will evaluate if you have learned anything. If you demonstrate humility, hard work, and respect for the people who make this company run, we can talk about giving you a management position. But you will never be CEO again. That ship has sailed." Julian nodded slowly. "It is fair. More than fair considering what I did." "There is one more condition," I added. "I want you to go to therapy. Individual, not couples. You need to understand how you got to this point, how you let someone manipulate you so easily, and how to recover the man you used to be." "I will do it," he said. "I promise." Robert cleared his throat. "If you allow me, I would like to add something. Julian, your father was my best friend. I watched him build this business with your mother from scratch. He made mistakes too. We all make them. But he always had the humility to admit them and learn from them. If you really want to honor his memory, that is the way." Julian wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Thank you, Robert. I will keep that in mind." The meeting extended another hour while we discussed logistical details. How to communicate the changes to the employees. How to handle the accounts Veronica had compromised. How to contact Vance and make it clear to him that any deal he thought he had with us was permanently canceled. Arthur would take the legal lead on that front, ensuring Vance understood that any attempt to use the information Veronica had given him would result in massive lawsuits. When we finally finished, it was almost 7 o'clock in the evening. Susan, David, and Robert said their goodbyes. They hugged me one by one before leaving. "We are going to get through this," said Susan. "This company has survived economic crises, pandemics, market changes. It is going to survive this too." When everyone left, only Arthur, Julian, and I remained in the boardroom. Arthur packed his documents in silence, giving us space. Before leaving, he put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Eleanor. It was hard, but it was right. Thank you, Arthur, for everything." He nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. I stayed alone with my son. The silence between us was heavy, full of unsaid things, of years of emotional distance that had become an abyss this morning. Julian spoke first. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Not now, maybe never. But I need you to know that I am sorry. I am so sorry that I don't have enough words to express it." I sat next to him, not at the head of the table, but beside him, as a mother, not as a CEO. "Do you know what the part that hurt me the most was? It wasn't that you kicked me out. It wasn't the public humiliation. It was that you didn't even look me in the eye when you did it. As if I weren't even worth that. I was afraid," he admitted, "afraid to see the disappointment in your face. Afraid to realize that I was making a terrible mistake. So I kept my eyes on the computer and pretended it was just a necessary business move. But it was pure cowardice." We remained seated in silence for a moment. Outside, the city began to light up with nightlights. From that height, everything looked small, orderly, under control. But inside here, in this room, everything had been chaos for hours. "When did it start?" I asked finally. "When did you begin to see me as an obstacle instead of as your mother?" Julian ran his hands through his hair. "I think it was gradual. Veronica began to plant seeds of doubt months ago. Small comments at first. That you had an old-fashioned mindset, that you didn't understand modern markets, that I could never grow professionally while I was under your shadow. At first I ignored her, but she was persistent. And I wanted to believe that I was ready for something bigger. Ego is a dangerous thing," I said, "especially when someone knows exactly how to feed it. I should have seen it. The signs were all there. The way she always had an opinion on company decisions, even though she had never worked in this industry. The way she constantly asked about shareholders and legal structures. The way she alienated me from you little by little until we practically stopped talking outside of work. And when I named you CEO, she saw her opportunity. Yes, she told me this was our moment. That if we didn't take total control now, we would never be independent. That you would never retire voluntarily, and that I had to be firm, make a statement of authority from day one, and that statement had to be publicly humiliating me." Julian closed his eyes. "She said that if I treated you softly, the employees would think you were still in charge, that I needed to establish immediate dominance so everyone understood there was new leadership. It sounds so stupid now when I say it out loud, because it is stupid. True leadership isn't about dominance or humiliation. It is about earned respect, correct decisions, and taking care of the people who work for you. Your father understood that. I understood that. But you let yourself be convinced that power is about shouting louder than everyone else. You are right. And now I lost everything. My position, my marriage, your respect. You didn't lose everything," I said softly. "You still have the opportunity to learn. You still have the opportunity to become the man your father would have wanted you to be. But it is going to require real work. It is going to require humility. And it is going to require you to accept that perhaps you may never reach the level you thought you deserved. I understand. And I am going to do the work. I promise." We sat a while longer. Finally, I stood up. "It is late. You should go home and rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I am going to communicate the changes to all employees in a general meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. I want you to be present. Are you sure?" His voice sounded insecure. "They need to see you. They need to see you accept the consequences of your actions. And they need to see you commit to being better. That is part of the process." Julian nodded and stood up. We walked together toward the elevator. Before the doors opened, he turned toward me. "Mom, do you think one day you can forgive me?" I looked him in the eyes. "I already forgave you, Julian. Because you are my son, and you always will be. But forgiveness does not mean things go back to how they were. It means I am willing to give you the chance to earn my trust again. That depends entirely on you." The elevator doors opened. He entered and turned around to look at me one last time before the doors closed. "Thank you for not giving up on me." The doors closed, and I remained alone in the hallway. I walked back to what had been Julian's office. My office now, at least for the next 6 months. I sat in the chair behind the solid oak desk and looked at the city through the windows. 40 years. 40 years building something from nothing. 40 years of sacrifices, tough decisions, sleepless nights. And in a single day, I almost lost it all because of the arrogance of my own son and the greed of a woman who never understood what it really meant to build something. But I didn't lose it. I took it back. Because I knew exactly what to do and when to do it. Because I never gave up real control, even though it seemed like I had. Because I understood that true power is not in titles or fancy offices, but in knowing exactly where the documents that matter are. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Linda. Just heard what happened in the board meeting. The news is already running through the whole building. Everyone is relieved that you are back. Do you need anything? I replied to her. Prepare a notice for a general meeting tomorrow at 9. All employees. I am going to personally explain what happened and what the plan is going forward. She responded immediately with a thumbs up emoji. I turned off the lights in the office and went down to the parking garage. The building was almost empty at this hour. My footsteps echoed on the concrete as I walked toward my car. I sat behind the wheel, but I didn't start the engine immediately. I just allowed myself a moment to process everything that had happened in a single day. This morning I had been expelled from my own company. Tonight I was back as CEO with more power than I had before. My son had learned a brutal but necessary lesson. A woman who tried to destroy my legacy was out forever. And I had demonstrated that 40 years of experience and knowledge will always beat youthful arrogance. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Control, clarity, renewed purpose. When I arrived, the house was dark and silent. I entered, left my briefcase in the study, and went directly to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of red wine, something I rarely did, but tonight felt deserved. I sat on the living room sofa with the glass in hand and looked at the photographs on the walls. My husband smiling at me from the frame. Julian as a child. The first factory. All the moments that defined our history. I wish you were here to see this, I told my husband's photograph. Our son made a terrible mistake today, but I think he is finally going to start understanding what you and I always knew. That building something real requires more than ambition. It requires integrity. I took a sip of wine and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be another complicated day. I would have to face the employees, explain what happened without completely destroying Julian's reputation, and begin the process of repairing any damage Veronica might have caused with her unauthorized negotiations. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to simply be satisfied. Satisfied having fought for what was mine. Satisfied having maintained dignity, even in humiliation. Satisfied knowing that when the moment came to demonstrate who really held the power, I did it with elegance, precision, and justice. The phone rang. It was Robert. Just wanted to make sure you were okay, he said. It was an intense day. I'm okay. Tired, but okay. What you did today was extraordinary. Eleanor. You kept your calm when anyone else would have exploded. You handled the situation with class. Your husband would be proud. Thank you. Robert, that means a lot coming from you. Rest. Tomorrow the real work of rebuilding begins. I hung up and finished my glass of wine. He was right. Tomorrow the real work began. But tonight I would allow myself to enjoy the quiet victory of having recovered what was mine without losing my soul in the process. I woke up at 6 in the morning. Not by the alarm, but because my body was already used to that schedule after 40 years of routine. I made myself strong coffee and sat in the kitchen while the sun began to rise. Today was the day I would have to face all the employees and explain what had happened. I couldn't show weakness. I couldn't show doubt. I had to be the leader I had always been. I showered. I dressed in a pearl gray tailored suit, elegant but accessible. I applied enough makeup to look rested, although I had slept barely 5 hours. I looked in the mirror one last time before leaving. The woman staring back was the same one who had built an empire, the same one who had survived losses, crises, and betrayals, and the same one who would keep going no matter what obstacles appeared. I arrived at the company at 7:30. The parking lot was still almost empty. I went up to my office and found a pile of documents on the desk that Arthur had left the night before. Updated financial reports, contracts pending review, press releases that needed approval. Corporate life didn't stop just because we had a family drama. At 8 o'clock, Susan arrived at my office with 2 cups of coffee. "I brought you this. You're going to need extra caffeine for the meeting." "Thank you. How is the atmosphere down there?" "Tense. Everyone knows something big happened yesterday, but no one has full details. There are rumors circulating. Some say Julian resigned voluntarily. Others say there was a corporate coup. One particularly creative one suggests Veronica tried to poison you." I let out a laugh despite everything. "Well, metaphorically, she did try to poison me. She just used my son's ambition instead of arsenic." "Do you know what you're going to say?" "I am going to tell the truth. Obviously without all the sordid details, but the truth nonetheless. That there was a misunderstanding about authority and corporate structure. That decisions were made without appropriate board approval. That I never resigned my position, and that now I am back to ensure the company's stability. And Julian? He is going to be present. He is going to apologize publicly. And he is going to announce that he will begin a professional development program, working in different departments. I am not going to destroy him completely in front of the employees. He is still my son, but I am also not going to lie and pretend he didn't make serious mistakes." Susan nodded. "It is the right approach. Firm but fair." At 8:45, the employees began arriving at the second-floor auditorium. I watched from my office window as they filed in. I recognized so many faces. People who had worked with me for years. People whose weddings I had attended. Whose children I knew by name. Whose stories were part of the fabric of this company. Julian arrived at 8:50. He entered my office without knocking, something that normally would have annoyed me, but today I let it slide. He looked terrible. Puffy eyes, unshaven beard, wrinkled suit. Clearly he hadn't slept much. "Are you ready?" I asked him. "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." "Good. That is growth." We went down to the auditorium together. When we entered, the murmur of conversations stopped abruptly. All eyes fixed on us. I walked toward the small stage at the front, while Julian sat in the first row next to Robert, David, and Susan. The auditorium was completely full. More than 200 employees present. Some seated, others standing at the back, all waiting for an explanation. "Good morning, everyone," I began. My voice sounded clear and firm thanks to the microphones. "I know yesterday was a confusing and disturbing day for many of you. I know rumors circulated, that there was uncertainty, and that some of you witnessed very uncomfortable moments. I am here this morning to clarify exactly what happened and what the path forward is." The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. 1 week ago, I made the decision to name my son Julian as CEO of this company. I did it because I believed he was ready. I believed he had learned enough, that he had the necessary maturity, and that it was time for the next generation to take the reins. However, what I did not communicate clearly was the difference between administrative authority and stock control. I paused and let those words settle. Yesterday morning, Julian made a decision he did not have the authority to make. He expelled me from this building in front of many of you. Some of you saw it directly. Others heard about it. And everyone wondered how it was possible that the founder of this company was treated that way. I saw some employees nodding. Others exchanged looks. What Julian did not understand, because I did not communicate it clearly enough, is that I never resigned from my position on the board of directors. I never transferred my stock control. I remain the owner of 80% of this company, and according to our corporate bylaws, only I have the authority to remove or appoint the CEO. Murmurs began. I could see comprehension spreading through the auditorium like ripples in a pond. Yesterday afternoon, the board of directors met in an emergency session. After reviewing the facts, evaluating the decisions made, and considering the well-being of this company and all the people who work in it, the board voted unanimously to remove Julian as CEO. That vote included the vote of Julian himself, who acknowledged he had acted inappropriately. I looked toward where my son was sitting. He kept his head down, but his shoulders were straight. He was listening to every word. The board also voted to name me as interim CEO for a period of 6 months. During that time, we are going to stabilize operations, we are going to ensure all processes are working correctly, and we are going to look for a permanent candidate for the position. Someone with proven experience in our industry who can lead this company into the future. A hand went up in the third row. It was a young man from logistics who had started barely 2 years ago. Yes, I indicated for him to speak. Mrs. Sterling, does this mean things are going back to how they were before? Yes and no, I answered honestly. They are going to return to normal in the sense that there will be stability, clarity in decision-making, and mutual respect among all levels of the organization. But no, in the sense that we all learned valuable lessons yesterday. I learned I need to communicate authority structures better. Julian learned that the title does not guarantee respect. And I hope you all have learned that in this company, regardless of your position, no one is above the core values of dignity and respect. Another hand went up. Linda from Human Resources. What is going to happen with Julian? Is he leaving the company? I looked at my son. He looked up and our eyes met. I signaled for him to come up to the stage. He hesitated for a second, but finally stood up and walked toward me. I passed him the microphone. Julian's voice trembled slightly when he began to speak. Good morning, everyone. Many of you have known me for years. Some since I was a child running through the factory. Others met me when I began working here formally 10 years ago. And all of you deserve an apology. He cleared his throat. Tears shone in his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. Yesterday, I made the biggest mistake of my professional and personal life. I humiliated my mother, the founder of this company, the woman who sacrificed everything to build something that gives employment to all of us. I did it because I was blinded by misguided ambition, because I listened to the wrong advice, and because I forgot the values my parents taught me about respect, humility, and honest work. The auditorium was completely silent. I do not expect you to forgive me immediately. I do not expect you to trust me as you did before, but I do hope to have the opportunity to earn that respect again. I am going to pass the next 6 months working in different departments of this company. I am going to learn from scratch how every process really works. And I am going to demonstrate with actions, not words, that I can be better than I was yesterday. I took the microphone back gently. Julian is going to remain in the company as a minority shareholder and employee in training. He will have no position of authority during this period. He is going to report to department managers just like any other employee, and he is going to be evaluated on his performance and attitude, not on his last name. I looked at the full auditorium. I want everyone to understand something very clearly. This company exists because each of you does your job with dedication and professionalism every day. It doesn't exist because of my last name. It doesn't exist because of fancy titles or offices on the 12th floor. It exists because there are real people doing real work that adds real value to our customers. The next 6 months are going to be hard work, I continued. We are going to review every process, every contract, every relationship with clients and suppliers. We are going to ensure this company is in the strongest possible position. And we are going to do it together, as the team we have always been. I saw heads nodding throughout the auditorium. The tension that had filled the space when I entered began to dissipate slowly. If anyone has questions or concerns during this transition period, my door is open. Literally. You don't need an appointment. If something worries you about your work, about the direction of the company, or about anything related to your well-being here, I want to hear it directly from you. An older woman at the back raised her hand timidly. It was Rosa, one of the most experienced sewing machine operators we had. She had been working with us for 32 years. Yes, Rosa. Mrs. Sterling, I just want to say that all of us here in production are very happy that you are back. Yesterday we were very confused and worried. You have always treated us with respect and fairness. It gives us peace of mind knowing you are at the helm again. Her words touched me deeply. Thank you, Rosa. And I want you and everyone in production to know that your jobs are safe. There will be no layoffs. There will be no drastic restructuring. What there will be is stability and responsible growth. Another hand went up. It was Marcus, the security guard who had had to escort me out the day before. Mrs. Sterling, I just wanted to apologize for yesterday. I was following orders, but I felt terrible doing it. Marcus, you have nothing to apologize for. You were doing your job. I will never blame you for following instructions from your supervisor. Anything else? I asked, looking at the auditorium. No one raised a hand. Good. Then I let you get back to your tasks. We have contracts to fulfill, customers to serve, and a reputation to maintain. People began to stand up. Some approached to greet me personally. Julian stayed to one side, observing. No one approached to talk to him directly, but no one showed open hostility either. The following days were intense. I called every one of our major clients. All expressed confidence in my leadership. Arthur kept correspondence with Vance's lawyers. As we predicted, he signed a non-disclosure agreement. Problem solved. Veronica tried to contact Julian several times. He ignored all her calls. I suggested he block any future communication. He did. The following Monday, Julian appeared at the factory at 7 in the morning, dressed in jeans and a work shirt. The production supervisor put him to work immediately. No privileges, no special treatment. I passed by the production floor occasionally. I saw Julian struggling with machines he had never operated. I saw sweat on his forehead while he carried rolls of fabric. But I also saw determination. He didn't complain once. Rosa stopped me one day in the hallway. "Your son is making a good effort, Mrs. Sterling. At first we thought he would only last a few days. But he has been here every morning on time. He asks questions. He accepts corrections." The months passed. The company stabilized completely. Julian completed his rotation through production and moved to logistics. David reported he was learning fast. Then came sales, where he learned how hard it is to maintain business relationships based on trust. In the 5th month, we found the perfect candidate for CEO. A woman named Catherine, with 25 years of experience in the industry. I presented her to the board and everyone agreed. One night, 2 weeks before my period as interim CEO ended, Julian knocked on my office door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Of course. Come in." He sat in front of my desk. He looked different from how he looked 6 months ago. More humble. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to really learn how this company works. And thank you for teaching me that true leadership has nothing to do with shouting or humiliating. You have worked hard, Julian. You have demonstrated real commitment. I am proud of that. I have been in therapy like you asked, 2 sessions a week. I am learning a lot about myself, about how I let ego cloud my judgment. That is hard work. Harder than anything you have done in this company. I know, but I think I finally understand what you and Dad always knew. That true power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists." I smiled. "Your father would be proud to hear you say that." We walked together toward the elevator. Before the doors opened, Julian hugged me. A real hug, long, the kind he hadn't given me in years. "I love you, Mom, and I regret having forgotten that for a while. I love you too, son. I always have. Even when you kicked me out of this building." 2 weeks later, on my last official day as interim CEO, I gathered the entire executive team. Catherine was present, ready to officially take over. I handed her the keys to the office. This company is in excellent hands. I told her in front of everyone. There was applause, hugs, some tears. But it wasn't a permanent goodbye. I was still the majority shareholder. I was still a member of the board. That night, in the quiet of my house, I sat on the same sofa where I had planned my counterattack 6 months ago. I looked at the photographs on the walls, and I thought about everything that had happened. My son had expelled me from my own company. I had been humiliated publicly, but I hadn't given up. I had used my knowledge, my preparation, and my legal power to recover what was mine. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with dignity, strategy, and justice. And in the end, I had won something more valuable than a corporate title. I had recovered my son. Not the child he once was, but the man he was finally learning to be. True power, I thought as I turned off the lights, doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to humiliate. It doesn't need to announce itself constantly. It simply exists. Quiet, strategic, unshakable. And that lesson, more than any contract or bank account, was the true legacy I would leave.